Today I'm reviewing Donald Duck, Balloonatics, or is that Balloonatics? I don't know. By Carl Barks. Now, this is part of the Fantagraphics reprints of Carl Barks's work. This is volume number 25 in their series reprinting the comics of Carl Barks. Now, Carl Barks well, he's like a lot of things I talk on this channel. He is very well known to certain people. A cult following, you might say, a niche taste. But on the other hand, I don't think that name is generally known to the general public at large if you were to stop a man in the street or whatever. Although his creations are known to the public at large. Like if you would stop a man in the street at random, I'm sure they would know who Uncle Scrooge is, or Huey, Dewey, and Louie, which are Carl Barks's creation. So, with apologies to the people who already know his stories backwards and forwards, I'll give some brief background here before getting into the comic. So, Donald Duck, in addition to being a cartoon character, was published in comic books in the 1940s and 50s. Mickey Mouse was as well. Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse had their comic books. Now, the policy at the time was that all the stories were credited to Walt Disney. So the illusion was that Walt Disney was writing everything. But in fact, Walt Disney was not writing everything. There were various different writers and artists who would actually work on those comic books. And Carl Barks was working on the Donald Duck comics. And he was famous for creating a certain style with those Donald Duck comics. For one thing, he created most of the characters that we associate with the Donald Duck comics. So, for example, Uncle Scrooge was a Carl Barks creation. Huey, Dewey, and Louie were created by Carl Barks. Although I think he actually created them for the cartoon initially, and then later he used them for the comics. Uncle Scrooge was first created in the comics and then later got integrated into some of the Disney's animated cartoons. But characters that were famous on DuckTales, like the Beagle Boys, or Magica Dispel, or Gyro, Gearloose. Those were all Carl Barks's creators. So he created most of the characters that are known in the Duckverse. And he was also famous for creating the style of story where Uncle Scrooge and Donald Duck and Huey, Dewey, and Louie would go on exotic adventures to fantastical lands or far-flung parts of the globe looking for secret treasure. Now, for my generation, obviously, this was best known for DuckTales. Or, sorry, what I mean to say is we know these stories through DuckTales. But DuckTales was based on the comics of Carl Barks in the 40s and 50s when he created them. 40s and 50s. When did he create them? Yeah, I think that's right. 40s and 50s is when he was drawing his comic books. He was working on a Donald Duck comic book, and then at one point I think Uncle Scrooge got his own comic book. There were several different titles. Here are some of them at the back. Walt Disney's comics. Donald Duck albums. These are the covers of some of the comics from back in the day. Um, Carl Barks had a big. I mean, these comics were popular in the United States, but they were really popular in certain European countries. Italy, they were really popular in. I think certain Scandinavian countries they were really popular in. And people began to notice that there was one artist associated with the Donald Duck comics who was better than the other ones, even though the stories were all officially credited to Walt Disney. In these European countries, they called him the good Donald Duck artist. And eventually, I'm not sure when, but eventually people did become aware that it was Carl Barks who was writing a lot of these stories. My own background with these, when I was a kid, I mean, I loved reading comic books as a kid, but I didn't have a lot of access to it. You know, my parents didn't buy me a lot of comics. Um, so I would read these Donald Duck, Uncle Scrooge comic books in waiting rooms of like restaurants or, you know, dentist's office where they were popular. There was one restaurant I remember. We used to go there every Thursday for like years when I was a kid, and they would have the Donald Duck comic books there, so the kids could take comic books and read the comic books while they waited for a table to open up. And then when the table actually opened up, they let you bring the comic books with you and read them while you waited for your food. I don't think that restaurant still exists. I think it was called Bill Knapp's, if I remember correctly. I think I don't know if that was a national restaurant or it was just in my hometown. But anyways, that's where I remember that's where I read all these comics back in the day. And then when DuckTales became really big, I was in fifth grade at the time. So, you know, getting a little bit older, but still young enough to enjoy the cartoons. Maybe it was fourth grade, fourth or fifth grade. And Ducktales was really popular. You know, with the kids in the playground, everybody was talking about them. And I put, you know, this was back in the days before Wikipedia, so you couldn't look it up on the internet. But I put two and two together and realized that Ducktales was based off of these old comic book. Um, and yeah, somehow I knew as a kid that those Uncle Scrooge and Donald Duck comics I had been reading were reprints of older comics. I don't know how I knew. Maybe just this, I don't know, the style or something. So I realized that DuckTales was a reboot of those old comics. And I used to I was quite proud of myself for figuring this out. So I used to go around the playground telling everybody, well, you know, actually, DuckTales isn't a new story. These are based on old comic books that used to be popular many years ago. I had no idea at the time just how absolutely hated that kind of pedantic personality was. I spent years living with that pedantic personality as a kid. And maybe I still have that. That's why I'm making these YouTube videos while I explain everything, huh? I just put that together now. Anyways, this collection. So, Fantagraphics has decided to reprint the complete Carl Barks series, going all the way from his first stories to his last stories. This is volume 25. Yep. Here it is, out of what I believe is a planned set of 30. Although they're publishing them out of order. So at the moment, it looks like volumes 1, 2, 3, and 4 haven't been published yet. But I think these are the ones that have been published. And they're giving them the deluxe treatment. So you've got this nice hardcover, uh, hardcover. You've got good quality paper. You can see, hopefully you can see on this video that the colors just are popping right off the page. So the colors have all been originally reproduced. And then at the end, you've got all these extras. The original covers from the comic. And then they've got all these people who wrote notes on the various stories that have been here. Interestingly enough, or actually maybe it's not really that interesting, but there are a lot of Italian names writing these because, as I mentioned, Karl Barks was really popular in Italy. So a few of their different Karl Barks, talk about the contributors here. More than a few of them grew up in Italy and grew up reading these books originally in Italian. There's a whole bunch of Karl Barks scholars who have worked in one form or another in their professional lives commenting on Karl Barks because these comics were really popular in Italy. Some of them are Italian. Now, this volume here is 25, and this is apparently right at the end of Karl Barks's career. And to give credit where credit is due, in the story notes, they don't attempt to gloss over this. They say, yeah, he was past his prime at this point. This was not his golden age. He was repeating stories themes that he had done many times before. So, to give credit where credit is due, at least the publishers are being honest about this. But for example, there's a story where Donald has to dog sit this dog who keeps escaping and causing trouble. This was apparently Donald getting forced into some sort of dog sitting fiasco. Was a story that Karl Barks had done many different versions of over the years. There's also a story about Donald trying to grow giant frogs and his nephews tricking him by buying plastic frogs, and then Donald getting into a giant frog suit. This apparently is also a variation of a story from earlier in Karl Barks's career. So a lot of these stories are, they're this Thanksgiving one where they've got to get turkeys apparently is something that Karl Barks had done before. He's repeating themes at this point in his career that he's done many times before. Also, most of these stories are what they refer to as his 10-page stories. He did longer stories. He was famous for his adventure stories in which Uncle Scrooge and Donald Duck go, and Huey, Dewey, and Louie go treasure hunting. But that's not the stories that are reproduced in this volume. I guess maybe because that part of his career was past at this point. I don't know. So at this point, he's doing 10-page stories, which are limiting. There's some sort of a premise or a gag. He works it for a few pages and then draws it around to a conclusion. And then we start with another 10-page story. In addition, in this collection, we have a number of stories that Carl Barks did not even write. Now this surprised me when I was looking at this. It says all comic stories written and drawn by Carl Barks, except as noted. So the first ones, okay, Balloonatics, they got someone else to color that, but the writing and drawing was by Carl Barks. But then as we get near the bottom here, somebody else was writing them and doing the colors, and I thought, well, why are these in Carl Barks's collection? But then, yeah, the reason is Carl Barks drew them. So somebody else wrote them, but Carl Barks drew them, and that is a collection of I don't remember, about 4 or 5 stories here at the end, which are for Grandma Duck's farm. So Grandma Duck, if I'm remembering correctly, was not one of Carl Barks's creations. There were some other people who also worked on the Donald Duck comics, and Grandma Duck was one of theirs. But she was a staple in the comics by this point. And anyways, these comics were written by somebody else, but drawn by Carl Barks. And yeah, they're okay. And then at the end, we get another series of stories. They explain about all this at the end. When they're going into the story notes here. So I guess Carl Barks had retired in the 60s, but then at the end of the 60s, they convinced him to come out of retirement. There was a series they were doing which called the Junior Woodchucks. The Junior Woodchucks is, if you're familiar with DuckTales or the Donald Duck comic books, that's the club that Huey, Dewey, and Louie are part of. And I guess during the late 60s, there was a comic book title that was dedicated just to the Junior Woodchucks. It was mostly just reprinting stories that Carl Barks had already done, but they got him out of retirement to draw some new stories. And he just gave rough drawings, and they were cleaned up and colored by somebody else. But apparently, when they were originally printed in the late 60s, early 70s, the person who cleaned them up and colored them didn't do a very good job, and they didn't resemble Carl Barks's style. So they were redrawn or recolored and printed again in the late 90s or afterwards. And then that's the version that is here. Yeah, they give the dates for all these stories somewhere here in the back. When was it? Yeah, the late 90s, or some of them even 2005. So yeah, we are really scraping the bottom of the Carl Barks barrel in this collection. And this isn't even the last one. I think this is 25. According to Wikipedia, there's at least 26 and 27 on their way. Wikipedia said something about a planned 30-volume edition. I don't know if that was just rounding or something, but there are at least 2 more on the way. Now, I don't want to be too hard on this collection because I enjoyed it. I mean, it's not great works of art. It's definitely has its limitations, and it's obviously for kids. But I'm nostalgic for these comics. As I said at the beginning of the video, I remember reading them when I was a kid. the artwork is classic um, Disney, or I guess classic Carl Barks. I mean, this is how you definitely picture these characters. It's silly, but I enjoyed reading it, so I don't want to complain too much. Um, but uh, I do feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect between the grand presentation these stories are being given with, this hardcover volume and all these notes and extras at the end, uh, compared to these stories, which are not Carl Barks's best work, and even I know this is going to be heresy, but even Carl Barks's best work, it's for kids. Um, so I worry a little bit that a volume like this is pricing itself out of the range of its ideal readers. I mean, the ideal readers are 6 and 7 year old kids. They're not the type of collectors who are going to be shelling money out for this. Now, I got this book from the library, so I didn't pay anything for it. But I looked it up on Amazon just out of curiosity to see how much it would cost, and that it looks like it cost $15 on Amazon. I think it was originally a $30 list price. I don't think the price is listed anywhere on the. Oh no, here it is. Okay, so sorry, that's not focusing, but that says $29.99. So yeah, originally $30, but the it's given a discount on Amazon, so you can pick it up for $15. And I guess $15 isn't too bad. $15 is about what I would pay for this, although $15 is a lot of money to a 7-year-old. And for that $15, you get. See, if you go to Amazon or something, it'll say like 210 pages. But in terms of story, you only get 171 pages. The other stuff is all extras here. So don't be fooled by, the page count on Amazon or something when it says 210 pages. It's only 171 pages of story. So I think I'm glad that this exists. I mean, I'm not sure it's entirely necessary to spill all this ink on Carl Barks's lesser works, but whatever. There are a lot of Disney aficionados out there, or Carl Barks fans. Yeah, let them have it. I'm glad that this exists, but I hope that this isn't the future of these comics. I hope that the main future of these comics is cheap reprints that can be enjoyed by 7-year-old kids very cheaply, and not these deluxe reprints. Now, I've been living abroad for so long. I'm just completely out of it. I haven't been into a comic book store in years, so I don't know really what's going on with these comic books. I mean, are they still being reprinted? I mean, when I was a kid in the 80s and 90s, they would reprint the Carl Barks comics. There were still those Disney Donald Duck comics that would come out, weekly or monthly, that you could buy in comic book stores, which would reprint these stories. So I hope that they're still being reprinted somewhere in a format that is cheap and for kids, and nobody will mind if the kids will crinkle them up, because these are exactly the type of forgettable stories that are made to be read by kids. Sorry, I'm repeating myself, aren't I? I've made my point. That's what I want to say about it. But yeah, I don't think it's bad that this exists. You know, these notes here are at the back are interesting. I enjoyed reading this. I learned some stuff from it. Uh, Interesting little biography here of Karl Barks. Some interesting notes. Um, yeah, what to say about these stories? So yeah, the majority of them looks like they're from the early '60s. At which point, I guess Karl Barks was already wrapping up his career. Uh, then we have the Grandma Duck ones, which he, yeah, illustrated but did not write. And we have the Big Bad Wolf here, who makes an appearance. Now, the Big Bad Wolf, of course, is a Disney character from the Three Little Pigs cartoon. Um, and I think he was better known back then than he is now. You know, I think that Disney Three Little Pigs cartoon is a little bit dated now, but it was a classic back in its day. I did not know that the Big Bad Wolf though was considered part of the Duckverse. Um, I actually tried to look this up on Wikipedia to see the Big Bad Wolf's appearance in the Duckverse, and couldn't find much on the internet about it. But they do note in the story notes at the end that this was one of the more bizarre appearances of the Big Bad Wolf in Disney canon. So I don't think he was a regular part of the Duckverse. Um, then we get to the Junior Woodchuck stories, again, originally published in 1969 or 1970, and then reprinted later. Now, in these stories, Uncle Scrooge is the antagonist. So he's trying to bulldoze down the forests, and Huey, Dewey, and Louie have to stop him. Or Uncle Scrooge is trying to butcher the whale for the whale blubber, and Huey, Dewey, and Louie are trying to save the whale. Or Uncle Scrooge is trying to build a highway, and Huey, Dewey, and Louie are trying to save the dinosaur fossil. Yeah, they make some interesting observations in the notes at the back that this was kind of how Uncle Scrooge's character had started out originally, way back when Karl Barks had first created him. I don't know, like in the 1940s. But that since that time, the character had evolved to be a much more sympathetic character. But now, for whatever reason, Karl Barks had regressed Uncle Scrooge back to being the antagonist. Although he's not completely without soul. He always does come around by the end and recognize that Huey, Dewey, and Louie are in the right. So he where is it? Yeah, he recognizes that the forest is worth preserving at the end, and he burns his plans to turn the forest into the city. Um, so yeah, that was interesting. It was interesting notes at the end, talking about how the character was regressing. Uh, yeah, again, not really any of the exotic adventures that Karl Barks is famous for. But I guess it's worth remembering Karl Barks didn't just do exotic adventures. He also did stories which were more located in Duckburg, and he also did these silly stories as well. And this one is mostly just silly stories. Yeah, I don't really know if I have that much more to say about this. I mean, I do really love the artwork here, and I do really love the colors, and I like the quality of this reprint. I just really hope that this is not the future of Carl Barks. That the future of Carl Barks will be cheap reprints that are easily accessible to children. But I'm glad this exists for collectors. All right.